She lived in a small, quiet town where life moved slowly, and people knew each other by face and by name. Her house was modest, a little faded with age, but it had a warmth that made anyone who entered feel welcome. The walls were lined with simple decorations, a few paintings she had bought at flea markets, photographs of her family, and small trinkets collected from her travels. The heart of the house was her living room, where a worn old piano sat against one wall. The piano had been with her for many years, inherited from her grandmother, and though it was scratched, out of tune, and missing a key, it held memories and a history that she cherished deeply. Her days were simple and routine. She worked at the local library, a place she loved because of the quiet smell of books and the steady rhythm of helping people find what they needed. She greeted everyone with a soft smile, never seeking attention, and lived her life without fanfare. Many people thought she was ordinary, someone who simply passed through life quietly, never raising her voice or standing out. But they didn't know that within her, a world of music thrived. A world that only she could see and feel. Every evening, after finishing her chores and returning from work, she would sit at the old piano. Her fingers would hover over the keys, and she would let the music flow naturally, out, without worrying about scales, notes, or perfection. The missing key had taught her to adapt, to be creative, and to find beauty in imperfection. Sometimes the sound was haunting, sometimes cheerful, sometimes chaotic, but it was always hers. She could lose herself in it for hours, and the rest of the world would melt away. Her love for the piano was something she had kept private. She had learned to play when she was a little girl, sitting on her grandmother's knee, listening to the melodies of a piano that now only existed in her memories. Over the years, she had practiced quietly, teaching herself new songs and experimenting with her own compositions. She didn't perform in public, not because she couldn't, but because she felt that her music was personal, intimate, and belonged to her alone. One afternoon, as she was shelving books at the library, a notice on the community board caught her eye. It was an announcement for the town's annual talent show. People of all ages were invited to participate, to showcase their skills and entertain the community. She paused and read it several times, her heart beating faster each time. The thought of playing in front of strangers made her nervous, but also excited. She had never considered herself ready for such an event, yet a small voice inside urged her to try. She walked home slowly that day, carrying the notice with her. The streets were calm, with children playing and neighbors chatting. She felt a mix of emotions, fear, excitement, and doubt. Could she really perform in front of an audience? What if they laughed at her broken piano? What if they didn't appreciate her music? These thoughts swirled in her mind, but alongside them was a growing determination. She wanted to share her music, even if only for a few minutes, see if it could touch someone else the way it touched her at home. She approached her piano with a mixture of reverence and anxiety. The keys were dusty, the pedals creaked, and one key refused to play, no matter how hard she pressed it. Yet she didn't see it as a limitation. Instead, she saw it as a challenge, a way to test her creativity and resilience. She sat down, adjusted the old bench, and began to play. The first notes were uncertain, hesitant, but as she continued, her confidence grew. She experimented with new melodies, weaving in harmonies that arose naturally from her emotions. The broken key, rather than a hindrance, became a part of the song, a reminder that imperfection could create beauty. Her neighbors often passed by her window in the evenings, sometimes stopping to listen quietly. Some smiled at the familiar sound. Others were curious about the music that filled the street. She had no idea how much impact her playing had on the people around her, but that didn't matter. For her, the piano was not about recognition. It was about expression, a way to connect with herself and the world in a language that words could never capture. Days turned into weeks, and the talent show announcement lingered in her mind. She practiced more intentionally, not just for herself, but imagining how it would feel to play for others. She tried different songs, adapted pieces to work around her piano's limitations, and even composed a few original melodies that reflected her life, her struggles, and her joys. The music became more than notes on a page. It became a story, a reflection of her soul. Her friends began to notice a change. They saw a sparkle in her eyes, a new energy that hadn't been there before. They encouraged her, offering words of support and gentle nudges to participate in the talent show. She listened, grateful for their kindness, but still uncertain. The thought of stepping into a crowded hall, of exposing herself and her imperfect piano, was daunting. Yet each time she played, the desire to share her music grew stronger, outweighing her fear. One evening, after finishing her practice, she sat back and looked at the piano. It was old, worn, and broken, but it had given her so much. It had been her companion through lonely nights, her teacher in quiet moments, and her friend when no one else understood her. She realized that the imperfections of the piano mirrored her own life, simple, unpolished, yet full of depth and meaning. If she could embrace the piano's flaws, perhaps she could embrace her own courage and take the first step toward performing publicly. The night before the talent show registration deadline, she sat at her desk with the notice in front of her. She held the pen in her hand, hesitated, and then slowly wrote her name and the title of her performance. Her hand shook slightly, but she felt a sense of liberation. She had decided to step out of her comfort zone, to risk embarrassment, to share her gift with the world. It wasn't about winning. It was about being brave enough to try. With the registration complete, a new sense of anticipation filled her days. She continued to practice, focusing not on perfection, but on expression. She imagined the audience listening, feeling the music, and connecting with it in their own way. Each practice session built her confidence, and she began to see the talent show not as a test, but as an opportunity to tell her story through music. As the day of the talent show approached, she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. She packed her music sheets, polished the piano keys, and even repaired the pedals as best as she could. She wore her favorite simple dress, one that made her feel comfortable and true to herself. She didn't try to impress anyone with appearance or showmanship. She wanted her music to speak for her. On the morning of the show, she walked through the quiet streets of her town, her heart pounding but her mind focused. She arrived at the hall, noticing the polished instruments, well-dressed performers, and an audience that seemed ready for entertainment. She felt a twinge of doubt but took a deep breath, reminding herself that her music was unique and meaningful. She had prepared, she had practiced, and now it was time to let her heart guide her fingers. Backstage, she found a small corner to collect her thoughts. Other performers were busy tuning instruments, rehearsing lines, or chatting with friends. She stayed calm, centering herself with a few quiet moments at her old broken piano. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the familiar rhythm of her music flow through her, grounding her in the moment. The piano might have been imperfect, but it was hers, and that gave her a strength she hadn't felt before. As her turn approached, she could hear the applause for the previous performer and the whispers of anticipation from the audience. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't let it stop her. She reminded herself that she wasn't performing to compete, but to share a part of herself, a story that had been waiting inside for years. When the host called her name, she rose, carried her music sheets, and approached the piano with quiet determination. Sitting on the bench, she looked out at the audience. They seemed surprised by the sight of the old, broken piano, and she felt their curiosity, even their doubt. But instead of letting it discourage her, she felt a surge of determination. She had practiced, she had prepared, and she had a story to tell. With a deep breath, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, letting the music rise from her heart and fill the hall. After signing up for the talent show, she felt a mix of excitement and fear that she had never experienced before. The registration felt like the first step on a path that she had longed to walk, but had never dared to. Each evening when she returned home, she would sit at her old, broken piano, trying to imagine how her music would sound to others. The missing key, the faded pedals, and the slightly warped keys became a symbol of the challenge she was about to face. She knew that performing in front of an audience was very different from playing alone. Yet she felt a strange energy stirring inside her. She spent hours experimenting with her music. Sometimes she would play slowly, feeling the weight of each note, letting it sink into the air around her. Other times she would speed up, letting her fingers move freely, almost dancing across the keys. The broken piano required her to think differently. She could not play exactly what she had imagined. So she learned to adapt, to be creative, to let her feelings guide her instead of relying on precision. The challenge, she realized, was part of the beauty. Her friends noticed a new brightness in her eyes. They would occasionally visit her home, bringing tea or snacks, and listen quietly as she played. Sometimes they would compliment her music. Sometimes they would just smile in awe. They encouraged her to practice more, to believe in herself, to not let fear control her. Their support was gentle but steady, like a soft hand on her shoulder reminding her that she was not alone. Even though she valued their words, she knew that this was ultimately her journey. The music she played was an extension of herself. She had to find her own courage to share it. Each day brought new challenges. She struggled with self-doubt, questioning whether she was ready, whether her music was good enough, and whether the audience would accept her. She imagined people laughing at her broken piano, at her simple appearance, at the way she moved. These thoughts would sometimes paralyze her, but she pushed through them, turning to the piano each evening, letting the music calm her and remind her of why she loved it so much. The notes she played were not just sounds. They were a conversation with herself, a way to face her fears and express her emotions. She also spent time writing her own music. The compositions were simple, yet expressive, reflecting her daily life, her dreams, and her quiet observations. She included moments of joy and sorrow, hope and frustration, weaving them into melodies that flowed naturally. The broken piano shaped the music in unexpected ways. Sometimes a wrong note would inspire a new direction. A missed key would create a rhythm that she had not planned, and the uneven tone would give her music a raw, emotional quality that no perfect instrument could produce. Each session at the piano became a journey of discovery, teaching her patience, resilience, and creativity. Her home became a place of preparation and reflection. She would tidy the rooms, make simple meals, and then retreat to the piano for hours at a time. She imagined the stage, the audience, the lights, and the way her music might travel beyond her living room. She thought about the faces she would see, the reaction she might receive, and the courage it would take to remain true to herself. Every evening ended with a sense of accomplishment, a quiet satisfaction that she had faced her doubts and continued moving forward. As the talent show approached, she started visiting the hall where it would take place. She wanted to familiarize herself with the space, to understand the acoustics, and to imagine how her broken piano would sound there. The hall was larger than she expected, with polished floors and a stage that seemed both inviting and intimidating. She walked slowly across the stage, feeling the wood under her feet, imagining her fingers on the keys and rehearsing silently in her mind. The environment was different from her cozy living room, but she felt that if she could adapt her music to the broken piano at home, she could adapt to this new space as well. Her nerves were intense the night before the show. She barely slept, thinking about the audience, the judges, and the other performers. She worried that her music would not be appreciated, her mistakes would be obvious, and that she would fail to convey the emotion she felt in every note. But even amid the anxiety, there was a quiet determination. She reminded herself of why she loved music, of the nights she had spent alone with the piano, of the way the notes could lift her spirits or soothe her heart. She realized that performing was not about perfection. It was about sharing a piece of herself with others. On the day of the talent show, she prepared carefully. She dressed simply but neatly, wearing the clothes that made her feel comfortable and herself. She packed her music sheets, ensuring they were organized and easy to read, and she made a small ritual of checking the piano pedals, dusting the keys, and taking a few deep breaths to center herself. The journey to the hall was quiet, with only the sound of her footsteps and the soft rustle of her bag. Each step felt heavier than usual, but it was also filled with anticipation and resolve. Arriving at the hall, she noticed the polished instruments, the well-dressed performers, and the chatter of the audience. It was a world far different from her quiet home and simple routines. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried her music sheets to the stage area. But she focused on the piano, letting its familiar presence calm her. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. The wood felt familiar under her touch, and the slightly uneven keys reminded her that beauty could exist in imperfection. Backstage, she observed the other performers. They practiced meticulously, tuning their instruments, rehearsing their movements, and chatting confidently with friends. She felt a mixture of admiration and intimidation. They seemed polished, prepared, and ready, while she had only her simple piano and her heartfelt music. Yet, she reminded herself that her strength lay in authenticity, in the honesty of her expression, and in the courage it took to perform despite her fears. Her friends were there in the audience, giving her reassuring smiles and small waves of encouragement. Their support was grounding, a reminder that she was not alone in this. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let the music flow through her, imagining the audience listening, imagining the way each note could touch a heart, inspire a smile, or evoke a memory. The piano might be imperfect, but it was her voice, her story, and her gift. When her turn was called, she rose, carrying her music sheets with quiet confidence. She walked to the stage, her steps deliberate, feeling the weight of anticipation and the energy of possibility. She sat on the bench, adjusted the pedals, and placed her hands over the keys. The audience watched in curiosity, noticing the worn instrument, the missing key, and the simplicity of her appearance. She could sense their doubt and wonder, but she let it pass. Focusing solely on the music she was about to create, the first notes were cautious, hesitant, but filled with emotion. She played slowly at first, letting the hall absorb the sound, letting herself adjust to the stage. As she continued, she found a rhythm, a natural flow, and a confidence that surprised even her. The broken key forced her to improvise, creating a melody that was unpredictable, yet beautiful. The uneven tones and faded notes gave her music a raw quality, making it unique and captivating. She lost herself in the performance, no longer thinking of the audience, the judges, or the imperfections. She was simply playing, expressing, and sharing a piece of her soul. The audience began to notice the magic in her music. Some leaned forward, intrigued by the unusual harmonies. Others closed their eyes, letting the emotion of the notes wash over them. The room became quiet, filled only with the sound of her piano and the unspoken connection between performer and listener. Her courage, her dedication, and her willingness to embrace imperfection were shining through. And it was undeniable by the end of the performance. The hall was silent for a brief moment, as if everyone was absorbing the experience. Then, slowly, applause began, growing louder and louder. People rose from their seats, cheering, clapping, and smiling, amazed by what they had witnessed. She sat at the piano, her hands still on the keys, overwhelmed by a mix of relief, joy, and gratitude. The broken piano, once a source of doubt, had become a vessel for beauty, creativity, and connection. After stepping off the stage, she was met by her friends, who hugged her tightly. Praising her bravery and the emotion she had conveyed, others approached, complimenting her music, asking questions, and expressing their admiration. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, not because of recognition, but because she had faced her fears, embraced her imperfections, and shared her gift with the world. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been transformative, teaching her that courage, authenticity, and passion could overcome even the greatest doubts. As she returned home that evening, she reflected on the experience. The talent show had been more than a performance. It had been a test of her spirit, a celebration of her creativity, and a moment of connection with others. She realized that music was not about perfection or acclaim, but about expression, vulnerability, and honesty. Her broken piano, her simple life, and her unwavering dedication had created something extraordinary, something that would stay with her and the audience forever. And in that quiet reflection, she knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in her musical journey, one where she could continue to share her story, inspire others, and find joy in the simple act of playing. The day of the talent show had finally arrived, and she could feel the nervous energy coursing through her body. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, practicing her pieces again and again on her broken piano, each session helping her find new ways to bring life to the music. She dressed simply but neatly, choosing clothes that made her feel comfortable and confident. Her heart pounded as she approached the hall, the sight of the stage and the gathering audience making her both anxious and excited. She carried her music sheets carefully, aware that every detail mattered, even if her performance was more about feeling than perfection. Backstage, the performers were busy tuning instruments, warming up, and talking among themselves. She watched them quietly, noticing how polished and confident they seemed. Some were dressed in fancy attire, their instruments gleaming under the lights. She felt a pang of doubt, but quickly reminded herself that she had something unique to offer. Her music was not about flash or perfection. It was about honesty and heart. Taking a deep breath, she centered herself, recalling the countless evenings she had spent alone with her piano, letting the music guide her fingers and emotions. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, feeling the weight of anticipation in every step. The audience murmured as they noticed her simple appearance and the old worn piano she had brought with her. She could sense their curiosity and perhaps some skepticism, but she refused to let it affect her. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The familiar texture of the piano under her fingers gave her a sense of comfort and connection. This piano had been with her through so many quiet moments. It had listened to her joys and sorrows. Now, it would share her story with the world. The first notes were hesitant, cautious, as she tested the piano and the hall's acoustics. The broken key and uneven tone created sounds that were unexpected even to her. But she embraced it, letting the music flow naturally, turning imperfections into opportunities for creativity. Each note carried her emotions, each pause a reflection of her journey. Slowly, she began to feel more confident, the anxiety giving way to a focused calm. She was no longer just performing. She was expressing herself fully, sharing a part of her soul through the piano. The audience listened in quiet curiosity at first. Some whispered to each other, noting the odd sounds and the simplicity of the instrument. But as she continued, a shift began to happen. The broken notes, the slight dissonance, and the raw emotion in her playing captured their attention. They leaned forward, drawn in by the unexpected beauty of the music. Her fingers moved with a fluidity that told stories words could not, conveying joy, longing, and tenderness. The imperfections of the piano made the performance unpredictable, exciting, and deeply human as she played. She felt a connection with the audience she had never imagined. Each note was a conversation, each chord a shared experience. She was aware of their presence but not intimidated by it. Instead, she used their attention to deepen her performance, allowing the energy of the room to guide her. Her music filled the hall, reaching into the hearts of those listening, creating an atmosphere that was intimate despite the size of the audience. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, one with the music, and, in a way, one with everyone in the room. There were moments of tension in her performance. The broken key would occasionally disrupt the flow, and the altovitune notes would create unexpected harmonies. Instead of panicking, she adapted, turning these moments into opportunities to explore new rhythms and melodies. She discovered that the limitations of her instrument allowed her creativity to flourish. Each mistake became a part of the story she was telling, each imperfection adding depth and emotion. The audience sensed this authenticity. Their focus and admiration grew with every passing minute. She noticed some people closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others nodded their heads in time with the rhythm. Caught in the emotional current she had created, there were smiles, tears, and quiet gasps of surprise as they realized that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. The broken piano, which she had feared would be a liability, had become a source of magic. Its flaws made the music unpredictable and alive, each note resonating with honesty and courage. As she continued, she allowed herself to lose control completely, letting her emotions dictate the flow of the performance. The music became a reflection of her life, the quiet moments of solitude, the small joys, the lingering fears, and the moments of hope. She played with a freedom that could not have existed in a perfectly tuned instrument, and the audience responded to it instinctively. They were not just watching a performance. They were witnessing a story, a journey, and a heart laid bare through sound. Midway through, she incorporated a melody she had composed herself, one that was deeply personal and filled with emotion. The notes were simple but expressive, carrying a sense of nostalgia and longing. She had worried about how this part would be received, but as the music filled the hall, she felt a collective breath from the audience, an unspoken acknowledgement of the beauty she was creating. Her confidence grew with each chord, each transition. She felt a sense of liberation she had never known before. The climax of her performance was both powerful and tender. She played with intensity, her fingers flying across the keys, creating layers of sound that were rich and textured despite the piano's imperfections. The broken key no longer felt like a limitation. It was a part of the performance, a symbol of resilience and creativity. She could see the audience captivated, their eyes focused, their expressions showing awe and admiration. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that her music was reaching them in a way that words never could. As the final notes echoed through the hall, she let them linger, allowing silence to follow, giving the audience a moment to absorb the experience. Then, gradually, the room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes, others with wide smiles. The reaction was overwhelming, not because of recognition, because she had shared something real, something raw, and something beautiful. The music had transcended the broken piano, the simple appearance, and the fears that had held her back. She rose from the bench, feeling a mix of relief and exhilaration. Her friends rushed to her side, hugging her tightly and praising her courage and talent. Others approached to compliment her, expressing amazement at how she had turned an imperfect instrument into a source of wonder. She listened to their words, grateful, but also quietly proud of herself for having faced her fears and remained true to her music. The audience's reaction was validation, but more importantly, was a reflection of the connection she had created through honesty and passion. Backstage, she reflected on the performance. She thought about the hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the small victories that had led her to this point. She realized that the experience was not just about the talent show, but about embracing herself and her music fully. The broken piano, the imperfections, and the simplicity of her life had all contributed to something extraordinary. She understood that true artistry comes not from perfection, but from authenticity, courage, and the willingness to share one's soul. Later that evening, she returned home, still carrying the energy of the performance. She placed her hands on her piano, now familiar in a new way, and played a few soft notes. The sound was warm and comforting, a reminder of the journey she had undertaken. She thought about the audience, the reactions, and the emotions that had been exchanged through music. She realized that this was only the beginning, that her connection to the piano and to others through music would continue to grow and evolve. Her simple life had been transformed in a subtle but meaningful way. She was still the same woman who walked through quiet streets, worked in the library, and cherished her modest home. But she now carried with her the confidence and courage that came from sharing her heart openly. She had discovered that imperfections could become strengths, that fear could be turned into determination, and that authenticity could inspire others. Her broken piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a symbol of her resilience, creativity, and the beauty that could emerge from embracing one's true self. In the following days, the memory of the performance lingered. People in the community spoke of the woman with the broken piano who had created something unforgettable. She received kind words from neighbors, colleagues, and strangers, all touched by the music she had shared. Yet she remained humble, knowing that the true reward was not in recognition, but in the act of expressing herself fully and connecting with others. Through her art, the talent show had been a turning point, a moment when courage met opportunity, and she had embraced it completely. The experience also gave her a new perspective on her daily life. She continued her routines, working at the library, caring for her home, spending evenings at her piano, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. Every note she played reminded her of the strength she had discovered, the fears she had overcome, and the connection she had made with others. Her music became a source of joy not only for herself, but also for anyone who happened to hear it. The broken piano, once a source of anxiety, had become a bridge between her world and the hearts of those around her. She realized that life, like her piano, did not need to be perfect to be meaningful. The imperfections, the challenges, and the moments of doubt were all part of the story. They shaped her music, her courage, and her perspective. She understood that her performance had been more than an act of skill. It had been an expression of life itself, filled with honesty, emotion, and human connection. And in that understanding, she found a quiet satisfaction and a deep sense of fulfillment that would stay with her for years to come. From that day forward, she approached her music with as the last echoes of her performance faded. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the hall. At first it was tentative, a polite acknowledgement. But as people looked around and saw others rising to their feet, the energy in the room shifted. The applause grew, filling every corner of the hall with a sound that was both filled and celebratory. She sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, overwhelmed by a mix of relief and astonishment. The audience, who had entered the hall, unsure what to expect from a simple woman with a broken piano, was now captivated by the magic she had created. Some people leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide, trying to take in the unexpected beauty of the music. Others closed their eyes, letting the melodies wash over them, their faces softening as they felt the emotion pouring from the piano. There were tears, gentle nods, and quiet whispers of admiration. The broken key, the faded notes, and the uneven sounds all combined to create something alive and human, something that could not have been achieved with a perfect instrument. Her music had touched them, surprised them, and made them feel something they had not anticipated. She rose slowly from the bench, her body trembling slightly with the intensity of what she had just experienced. Walking off the stage, she felt the eyes of the audience on her.
Ow.
Not with judgment or skepticism, but with appreciation and wonder. People approached her, smiling, shaking their heads in disbelief, complimenting the depth and emotion of her performance. They asked her about the music, the broken piano, and how she had managed to turn imperfections into such a moving experience. She smiled softly, answering humbly, explaining that she simply played what she felt and let the music guide her. Her friends rushed to her side, hugging her tightly, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. They spoke quickly, their words overlapping in a rush of praise. But she barely heard them, lost in the flood of emotions from the performance itself. Relief, joy, pride, and a sense of accomplishment mingled inside her. She had faced the fear that had haunted her for weeks, played in front of strangers, and shared her heart without reservation. The music she had thought would be too personal, too flawed, had resonated deeply with everyone in the hall. Throughout the evening, she noticed subtle reactions from the audience that surprised her. Children sat with rapt attention, their eyes reflecting wonder at the sound of the piano. Older audience members leaned back, closing their eyes as though transported to memories or places long forgotten. Young adults exchanged glances, nodding to each other in silent acknowledgement of the beauty they had just experienced. She realized that her music had crossed generations and backgrounds, speaking in a language that everyone could understand, one that transcended words and appearances. As she gathered her things to leave the hall, she felt a tap on her shoulder. A member of the judging panel, an older woman with a kind expression, spoke to her quietly. She said that she had never heard anything like it, that the way she had transformed a broken instrument into something so extraordinary was remarkable. She emphasized that the performance had been a lesson in creativity, courage, and the power of authenticity. Her words were simple, yet they carried weight, confirming what the audience had already expressed through their astonished reactions. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People came up to her, each sharing their amazement and gratitude. Some were musicians themselves, curious about her techniques and improvisations. Others were simply members of the community, moved by the unexpected beauty of her music. She listened to them, smiling, answering questions, and feeling a profound sense of connection. Her performance had become more than a moment of personal achievement. It had become a shared experience, a bridge between her world and the hearts of others. Back at home, she sat at her old broken piano once more, reflecting on everything that had happened. The silence of her living room felt different now, filled with memories of the applause, the smiles, and the astonished faces of the audience. She played a few notes softly, letting the music flow gently, savoring the quiet intimacy that had always been her private space. Yet even in that quiet, she felt the lingering energy of the performance, a sense that something extraordinary had occurred, not just in the hall but within her as well. Over the next few days, the experience continued to unfold in her mind. She replayed the moments on stage, the way the audience had reacted, and the feeling of being fully present in her music. She realized that fear and self-doubt had been powerful teachers, showing her that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Her broken piano, once a source of worry, had become a symbol of resilience and creativity. Proving that limitations could inspire rather than constrain, she also noticed changes in the people around her. Friends and neighbors mentioned the performance repeatedly, speaking of it with reverence and excitement. Some came to visit her, hoping to hear her play again, drawn by the authenticity and emotion she had shared. Her colleagues at the library congratulated her, curious to see the music that had captivated so many. Even strangers seemed to seek her out, wanting to understand how someone so ordinary in appearance could create something so extraordinary. She received letters, messages, and invitations to perform again, but she remained humble, understanding that the true reward was not in recognition, but in the shared experience of music. She began to see her broken piano in a new light. The missing key, the uneven tones, and the worn wood were no longer imperfections, but unique characteristics that gave her music personality and depth. She embraced the instrument fully, allowing it to guide her creativity and expression. Each practice session became a new exploration, a journey into the possibilities of sound and emotion. She discovered that by accepting the piano as it was, she could play with a freedom and authenticity that had been missing before. Her life, though still simple, was imbued with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. She continued her routines at the library, in her home, and in her quiet neighborhood. But the memory of the performance lingered, influencing how she approached each day. She noticed details she had once overlooked, the way sunlight fell on the piano keys, the rhythm of the wind through the trees, the subtle melodies in everyday life. These observations found their way into her music, enriching it and deepening her connection to both the instrument and the world around her in the evenings. She continued to play, experimenting with new compositions and improvisations. She no longer feared mistakes or unexpected notes. Instead, she welcomed them, understanding that they added character and emotion to her music. The broken piano had taught her that imperfections could enhance beauty, that authenticity was more powerful than perfection, and that courage could transform fear into something extraordinary. Each note she played carried this lesson, resonating not only within her, but also in the hearts of anyone who listened. She also found herself reflecting on the emotional journey she had undergone. The initial fear and doubt, the hours of practice, the uncertainty of performing in public, and the eventual triumph had all contributed to a profound personal growth. She realized that the performance had been a turning point, a moment when she embraced vulnerability and discovered her strength. The audience's astonishment was a mirror, showing her what she had always known deep down, that music is not just about technical skill, but about honesty, courage, and the willingness to share one's heart. The impact of her performance extended beyond the hall. Members of the community spoke about it for weeks, inspired by the way a simple woman with a broken piano had created something so beautiful. They admired not only her talent, but also her bravery, creativity, and authenticity. She became an example of what could be achieved when one embraced imperfection, followed passion, and trusted in the power of self-expression. Her story encouraged others to take risks, pursue their own passions, and find beauty in their unique journeys. Despite the attention and admiration, she remained grounded. She did not seek fame or accolades. Her focus remained on the music itself, on the joy of creating and sharing it. She continued to play in her home in small gatherings and occasionally in local events, always prioritizing authenticity and emotional connection over technical perfection. Her broken piano, once a source of insecurity, had become a trusted companion, a symbol of resilience, and a conduit for the expression of her innermost feelings. Through it all, she remained deeply connected to the lessons she had learned. Fear was not an obstacle but a guide, showing her where growth and courage were needed. Imperfections were not limitations, but opportunities for creativity and expression. Authenticity and vulnerability were more powerful than any polished skill. And above all, music was a bridge, connecting hearts, transcending appearances, and transforming ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences. The performance had been a single event, but its influence would continue to shape her life, her music, and her understanding of what it meant to truly share oneself with the world. As days turned into weeks, she found a quiet contentment in knowing that she had faced her fears, embraced her broken piano, and created something remarkable. The memory of the audience's astonishment, the applause, and the heartfelt reactions would remain with her forever. She continued to play, each note carrying the lessons of courage, creativity, and authenticity. The broken piano, once a source of worry, had become a powerful instrument of expression, teaching her that true beauty often arises from imperfection, and that the simplest actions, when guided by heart and honesty, can leave an unforgettable impact on others.